Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Wild with me, Sarah Wilson. In this episode I want to talk about democracy because it is in fact in some hectic peril, you might have noticed. The United States, which I think now presents as a portent for where the rest of the Western world is heading, has just lost its liberal democratic rating from the VDEM Institute in Sweden, one of the most widely used global democracy datasets. While 75% of the world's population, according to this same survey, now lives under authoritarian rule. And let's break out the F word here. Fascism is, in fact, descending globally. So I want to talk about this frightening phenomenon, but more importantly, I want to talk about whether we can actually stop the collapsing fascist slide and save democracy, but also whether we should be saving democracy, whether there is something else beyond the neoliberal democratic institutions that we're familiar with that could come next. Now, this is all part of this broader conversation that I'm having here on Wild over the next 12 episodes or so, in which I investigate what we can be doing now to be part of a more life-generating, a more humane and perhaps evolved and mature future, the future that comes after all of this. Now, my guest today is a global expert in fascism and democracy. And 10 years ago, after receiving rape and death and imprisonment threats for speaking out against President Erdogan's authoritarian government, award-winning journalist and author Ece Temelkuran was forced out of her home country, and that's Turkey, and has lived in exile ever since. Her book, How to Lose a Country, The 7 Steps from Democracy to Dictatorship, which came out about 7 years ago, and was actually re-released in 2024 with a new subtitle, very tellingly, 7 Steps from Democracy to Fascism. It described how close all the so-called civilized nations are to the kind of fascist slide that she witnessed in her own country. Now today, Ece, who's been recognised as Turkey's most read political columnist, has published a new book, Nation of Strangers, Rebuilding Home in the 21st Century, which has just been shortlisted for the 2026 Women's Prize for Nonfiction. So her thesis in this book is that as fascism spreads globally, a lot of us are going to become exiles of one kind or another, driven out of our sense of belonging by possibly fascism, but, a sense of kind of growing cruelty in our country, perhaps censorship, or by simply being surrounded by friends and family who just no longer see what's happening in the world as we do. As she writes in the book, these times are orphaning all that is humane. An uncaring world is in the making, and it will unhome humans like you and me. The book shares how we can best and beautifully build home again from here. Now, the collapse of democracy and the rise of fascism is speeding up, and more of us are wondering how to be in this incredibly transformative moment. Now, Ece says we're entering an age of survival and that we should look to those who have already lost their homes and have had to learn to rebuild out of nothing. So we're talking the exiles, the refugees, the immigrants, and the homeless people of the world. We need to look to these people to learn how to move forward. Now, it's such a fresh thesis, and it's got me thinking over the last few days and weeks that I've been researching this episode. It's got me thinking so differently about the loneliness that I feel, the unmoored feeling that I've had for several years now. Like Ece, I live out of a suitcase outside of my own home country. But the real sense of being unhomed, which is the word she uses, comes from feeling like I just don't match up with the moral terrain of the world. And I suspect there's a lot of you feeling the same way. It's a sort of acedia. So I was super interested to speak to her about learning how to use this very feeling to guide us forward into this what comes next that I keep referring to. Now, you might be left with quite a few questions after this conversation. And thankfully, you can now watch it as a video if you're not already on YouTube or on Substack. Now, over at Substack, you are also able to join in the comments, and that's where Ece and I will chime in and answer any further questions or thoughts that you might have in response to this episode. But for now, let's get to the interview. Ece, thank you so much for joining us here on Wild.
Thank you, Sarah. It's lovely being with you after so many trials.
I know it's taken a fair bit for us to both get here. I think in big part because, we're both living across borders and we've found it hard to find each other in a time zone that actually corresponds, but we're here finally. I might just ask you, how are you at the moment? How are you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty well, actually. It's a little bit strange, but then finally, I think I am on the same page with the world. Everybody's feeling more or less unhomed, displaced, misplaced, disoriented, uncertain. They're feeling the crisis of uncertainty. So I think I'm feeling together with people because earlier, as you very
Yeah.
well know, I wrote books too early, like How to Lose a Country and Together. And now I think everybody's on the same page especially after Trump came to power, especially with what's going on in Iran at the moment. Everybody's feeling the reality of the world as I have been, talking about.
Yeah, yeah. If we backtrack 7 years to How to Lose a Country, you were essentially giving a bit of a warning to the West, in particular, that it too is perilously close to fascism, and dot dot dot. Here we are. And look, I get the sense that everybody back then was saying, for instance, in the United States, I listened to interviews, that back then, where people were saying, oh, but it won't happen to us. And of course, now we can see what's happening in the United States. It's no longer considered a liberal democracy. Here in Australia, where I'm located at the moment, but also in the UK, I imagine, you're getting the same response. Oh, but it won't happen here. And what I might get you to do is explain that, like, talk through the 7 steps that you outline in How to Lose a Country, that essentially point to the fact that it doesn't happen with the sudden arrival of tanks and coups. It's a very, very different process. So could you talk through a few of those, 7 steps that you outline?
Yeah, sure. How to Lose a Country was, yes, it was a warning, but it was also, I was trying to show the logic of what's happening to the world because confusion is one of the most important tools of today's fascism. So I wanted to detangle that mess that has been imposed on us, that has been maddening the world for quite a long time, since the last 10 years now. So I found out 7 global patterns, how it happens in every country, from India to Turkey to Italy, and now, as you said, UK and the US. The first step is create a movement. Party is over. All these movements come to the political scene by claiming that they are above and beyond politics. They are clean. They're going to clean the swamp, as Trump famously said in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
They create a movement, and this is an energetic, invigorating promise for people. Now we're finally getting rid of the corrupt system, and finally we're going to be really heard, because representative democracy lost its charm long ago, and people were already a little bit enraged, and also, they were feeling insignificant, unheard. So I think that promise of creating a movement not only gives them this idea that they're finally going to be seen, but also it invigorates the political sphere. And then the second step is disrupt the rationale. As Trump's, I'm giving Trump example because everybody's closely
Good
watching
idea.
the example, whereas all the other examples from Tayyip Erdogan to Modi, they did exactly the same thing. They disrupted the rationale and terrorized the political language. Trump, as opposed to other leaders, of course, did this in a maximum speed and with the utmost shamelessness that any, humanity is capable of. So it's a little bit, the outrage of that, the bluntness of that example is very convenient to talk about in terms of what's happening.
But it's
And then
also, I mean, that technique is incredibly distracting. It's part of that overwhelm and the confusion, isn't it? Like just the speed of the and the volume of wrongness, sort of dumped on us all at once.
yeah,
It's part of the tactic. Yeah.
exactly. It makes you feel helpless. It makes you feel like a goalkeeper when everybody in the stadium is shooting a goal towards you. So you're constantly trying to keep up with that speed of madness that they are producing in political sphere and also in social life as well. And then comes the very famous, which I think is very important at the moment, is the loss of shame, removal of shame from political and social sphere. All those precedents that we held on to in terms of democracy, in terms of social life, in terms of rule of law, rendered into this paper tiger. All those things that we deemed impossible were easily made possible by Trump. For instance, would anybody in the US imagine a president who is openly going against the law, not recognizing the rule of the court and so on? No, it wasn't. But then these leaders, they do that. And then suddenly with a slap, they are throwing away all the institutions that humanity built, the country built, for, during history. And then comes this is quite dangerous. This becomes dangerous at this step, fourth state. It is the infiltration of the judiciary system. Then it is really horrible. Meloni, a few weeks ago in Italy, tried to do that through a referendum. She tried to politicize the judiciary system, which Italian people thankfully said no to. But yeah, in Trump's America, it's happening in a different way by appointments because it's a presidential system. In UK, it's happening in a different way. And in Turkey, it happened through a referendum, which was almost identical to Meloni's referendum in 2012. And then, the other steps follow. But then the last step, which United States arrived too early, is, the dictator, the authoritarian leader, builds his own country, and you are deemed second-class citizen at best, enemy of the people often. You're often deemed that. And then you become homeless. You lose your country, even though you're living in that country. I think Minneapolis was a great example of this. Suddenly people were attacked by their own government, which was unimaginable for Americans. Like they wouldn't imagine a government hostile to its own citizens, which I have been talking about in How to Lose a Country in length. That unimaginable thing, that, phenomena that they told, oh, it wouldn't happen here, finally happened in the United States. And through refugee crisis in Europe, I think it's happening to European countries as well at the moment. Yeah. So this is where we are. Everybody's losing their own country in different speed, in a similar way.
Yeah, that reminds me of something that I read about. You wrote an op-ed, I think it was for The Guardian not so long ago, and you brought in this idea of cloud fascism. And I think that sort of picks up on how it can be happening in different ways all around the world. So it's actually hard to spot, because we now live in a global civilization. It's not isolated. What happens in Turkey doesn't stay in Turkey. And so, can you just explain what you actually meant by cloud fascism?
Well, it is not easy to spot. It is amorphous. It doesn't wear military uniform. It doesn't have a headquarter. It doesn't come from one source of power. Sometimes it comes from, ground up. It's as if people are asking for it. And it comes through the, unraveling of social fabric as well. So there is this everywhereness of it, and you cannot really tell what it is. So that is why it's cloud-like. But in the same Guardian article, I also talked about that we are coming up with these sexy terms. Yanis Varoufakis says it's techno-feudalism. I say it is cloud fascism. Somebody else finds a different. I think Timothy Snyder is working on a new term at the moment in Canada. I think we somehow know that this is old school fascism. It's just, wearing a different costume.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, is that the AI crew, the tech bros, have entered into all of this, and they've got their fingers in every aspect of this. And it is cloud-like. It does extend around the world. And so the spread of something like fascism just becomes that much easier and that much faster and that much harder to pick for the everyday citizen.
Yeah, because it also comes in the costume of individual choices, freedom of expression, being heard in this grand agora of social media, so on and so forth. Of course, this, AI, social media, new communication technologies didn't help. And as I told in How to Lose the Country, actually, this kind of social media, starting with Twitter, now X, Facebook, and so on, they turned the agora. We are imagining them as agora, but actually they are arenas, and people are there to kill each other. One thing, and the second thing is all these media companies. They did not acknowledge their social responsibility from the very beginning, and they were very lucky. Of course, they were building their companies in a world where profit is the only sacred value. So they were untouchable, and they're still untouchable. It is so interesting that such a mighty communication network is impossible to imagine as a nationalized, for instance, nationalized media company. We cannot even imagine that, although they should be nationalized, of course, or they should be, given to a consortium that looks after the good of humanity. But this is also unimaginable. Anyway, so that cloudness also comes from that fact that communication is now everywhere, and it's absolutely terrorized, and it is jungle rules.
Yeah, absolutely. And I get the sense that you'd probably agree with this, because I feel like there's really no going back now. We've got ourselves into a position where nobody can undo all of this. And, you've been watching this, for some time now. And of course, it's now playing out as you warned. But I'm wondering, do you feel that this is going to spread now globally? Do you feel that we are now in something that we can't get out of? So, if you're listening to this conversation in Australia or in the UK, will it happen there? Will they be spared, or are we all part of this now?
It's already happening. Of course, it might not look like Turkey in the end, but then it is happening, especially during Gaza. Actually, that period was a sneak preview of what will happen in these countries. It was easy to evade for many people, bypass or, pretend that they don't see. But many people who were, raising their voices for human rights of Palestinians, for, all those thousands of Palestinian kids who were killed by Israeli war machine, they were not only dismissed, but they were also criminalized. So this is a good point, I think, to think back, because there is this almost a mythology of, how did Germans, all of them, fall into this? How did, Holocaust happen and so on? We always wanted to, for such a long time, understand how mediocre human, ordinary people fell into the lies of the Nazi period. This is how it happens. This is exactly
the banality of evil.
Yeah, it is. It is
exactly
small complicities that we all add up to, that we all accumulate, and all those small complicities actually allows the political evil to take the center stage. So yeah, it is actually the key word, I
Yeah.
think, is complicity for how to lose a country, for what's happening in the world at the moment. It's just, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. Nigel
Mm.
Farage is not that bad because he's funny and so on. No, it's not funny, and it's that bad, actually.
Yeah, there's a term I've heard that's being used at the moment, baseline shift. The baseline of what is acceptable and normal just keeps shifting lower and lower and lower as we allow this to happen. I can feel it in myself. I can feel as I read these headlines, I've become almost immune to it all. I have this acceptance that I would never have had 2 years ago. And I think I've got this right. I think you said in an interview recently that Gaza was an experiment. It was like an experiment to see how much the world can actually swallow. And I think that's a really beautiful, horrible way of putting it. It was. And look at the result.
Unfortunately, yes. Yeah. And now Iran, we're seeing even worse, I think, not even worse, but equally worse. What's happening in Iran is unacceptable, even though the regime is absolutely unacceptable and it's against every kind of human rights and everything, but still raining bombs on Iran, which is an absolutely through an unlawful war, and the entire world watching. That is, baseline shift as well. Now, this is
Yeah.
acceptable. And this was all, I think,
Yeah.
not all, but partly thanks to Gaza.
Yeah,
That was an
I think so
experiment.
too. I
And then
think it was a
Iran.
real turning point.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in your latest book, Nation of Strangers, you make the point that what's happening out there, at arm's length that we watch on our screens is actually now happening to all of us, that we're all becoming unhomed. We're all becoming the stranger, the immigrant, the exile. You touched on it a little bit at the beginning of this chat, but could you explain a little bit more what you mean by that?
Well, Nation of Strangers is two things. Well, several things, but mainly the narrative is my story as a quote unquote exile. But also it is the story of human condition today. I am unhomed. Before I left Turkey in 2016, I felt unhomed because the country was no longer safe for people like me who were critical of the regime. So I felt this sense of being unhomed already. In 2016, I left Turkey, Istanbul, and I lived in Zagreb for 6 years, 1.5 years in Hamburg, and now I'm living in Berlin. So that story, I never wanted to tell that story because it's too painful, too emotional. I don't want to put myself out there. I don't want to look like those exiles selling their painful stories because it makes Europeans feel too good about themselves.
As the haven where everybody goes.
It's a
Yeah.
safe haven,
Yeah.
yeah. But then I noticed that what's happening in the world is very similar to my personal experience as well. We are being unhomed. Unhoming, to be unhomed, is a 18th century verb that I resurrected. It is not only about losing your home or having to leave your home, but it's also about feeling homeless in your own country, feeling unsafe in your home. So I think we're all suffering from that on some level. There is the political level. We have this outrage that is not addressed. There is no political party that is addressing our outrage about what's happening in the world now. There's the moral outrage because we are supposed to live in this world where Gaza happens and we are supposed to develop this numbness to survive. We are supposed to not to feel. That is moral homelessness. And also spiritual homelessness with AI, because the language, which we thought was the ultimate human thing, is now we share it with a unhuman entity. So we're losing our spiritual home because language has been humanity's spiritual home. And then, of course, there is the, as they call, refugee crisis, migrant crisis. This is one of those times in the human history where most people, highest level of, movement is happening. And this kind of movement happened before the First World War, and that caused the First World War in a way. So yeah, we are in that times of crisis, moral, political, and physical loss of home, I think turned the human condition into feeling like refugees or immigrants or exiles even in our own home. And this happens not only when you leave the home, as I said, but also when you watch the news and your country is becoming something unrecognizable. And then, that's when you start feeling unhomed. I think many people share this all around the world. They're feeling misplaced, not
I think
displaced, perhaps misplaced in the world in these times, I think.
Yeah. What's it like to feel unhomed for you?
It is, I had to think about it quite a long time while writing the book, and I had to read about it a lot. And the most, central sensation is the loss of sense of space and sense of time. So everything becomes, the same. Same tastelessness takes over the space wherever you are, and you lose the sense of time, basically, because, and this is a very common symptom among those who had to leave their home. They lose sense of time. So life becomes unreal, and your sense of self becomes unreal. And what I learned through writing the book, Nation of Strangers, and thanks to all the people I met while writing that book, is that self is impossible on your own. Self is only possible with other people. Sense of time is only possible with other people. And sense of place is very much connected to other people. And home, therefore, is other people and nothing else. And for many people, for humanity, perhaps, this will become the case very soon. As we become more and more unhomed, we will understand how central, how vital it is to connect ourselves to other people, and only then we can feel at home in this world. This is important to me on a moral level, but also I think the new politics will trickle down from this morality, the vitality of human connection. So yeah, after writing Nation of Strangers, now I'm feeling unhomed, but I also feel that I have people that I consider home, and that is the only thing. This is interesting because since the beginning of humanity, we are wired to think home as a place. So I'm trying to do something a little bit impossible, but I think it is necessary for all of us to think that home might not be a place, especially considering all those people who lost their homes to climate crisis or wars. When there is no home to go back to, I think we need another definition of home. That's why I wanted to write Nation of Strangers, not only as my exile story, but also the story of human condition today.
So do you think a new definition of home is going to be required to cope with what's ahead? Because in Nation of Strangers, this is just such a wonderful, beautiful, fresh thesis. You essentially say we need to be turning to the exiles. We need to be learning from the refugees. We need to be actually absorbing what it is that they're doing and take that with us into the future. So I'm wondering if we can actually kind of get to this question, like, what should we be doing? You say this, once you call it fascism, you have to act on it. So, we're in this kind of liminal space in between, sort of the old world and what's ahead. What are you actually suggesting that we learn from the exiles of the world? What do you say that we should be starting to take and practice and I guess absorb into our being, to be able to cope with what's ahead, but also to build what comes after all of this?
This is the hardest thing. That what I'm about to say is the hardest thing. It's easy to say, but it's almost, really, really quite difficult to practice or to feel. But one thing you learn after losing home, or one thing you have to learn is that life is here and now. It's no longer in the past. You cannot go back home. Even if you return, you cannot arrive because it's in the past. And the future is bleak, always. So you have to build home in your life here and now. And I think the world has to learn this from this piece of wisdom, so to speak, from exiles, immigrants, refugees. Yes, I wanted to turn the tables with Nation of Strangers because all these strangers that arrive in new lands are considered to be begging for help or needing help and so on. Whereas they're also carrying this wisdom. They are practicing this almost impossible idea that life is here and now. And as you said, world is in an impasse, so to speak. We know that there's no going past, although some nostalgia about this has been weaponized by MAGA and its likes. And we know that future is quite bleak. So we have to do life here and now. So I think refugees and immigrants are the pioneers of history. I think we are future tense you. And somehow I think many people, without even noticing, feeling the sense of future is not... let's say we are mourning in future tense. Many of us do. We know that we're going to lose many things, and we know that it's almost impossible to stop that loss. And we are making ourselves futureless in that sense as well. So the only possible thing is here and now. And those people who lost their homes and who had to rebuild their homes learn this with their flesh and bone.
Do we have to be in it ourselves to be able to really learn this? Or is this a matter of reading the works of, and there's been many over the years of exiles and refugees and immigrants who've written about their experiences? Is it about going working in a refugee camp and literally, asking these kinds of questions, or just absorbing the way they go about things, their wisdom? What's the actual tangible way of going about this?
Yeah, befriending refugees, immigrants, and exiles wouldn't hurt, of course. But then, Sarah, How to Lose a Country and Together, which was the solution, my offering of solution to the world's problems, were different books. Now, Nation of Strangers, it's not a political manifesto. It is not here's the solution book. It is more of a resolution. I think this is why I said in the beginning of this chat that I'm kind of feeling fine because we are finally on the same page. I feel I'm on the same page with the world. Nation of Strangers, rather than offering a solution, I think it offers a state of being, sense of being. How can we be in this world, live with this reality, and how can we remain human? And I wanted to offer a certain language, so to speak, in Nation of Strangers. That's why it's so intimate. It is written in letters to dear strangers. It's very, very personal. It's almost, too vulnerable to the level of embarrassment. So yeah, it's offering a sense of being. Because one of the things, I think people like us, writers, intellectuals, whatever, opinion leaders, all this time we thought that understanding and analyzing the world is enough. But I think we are approaching a time when we will have the moral responsibility to make the reality manageable for people. We have to tell them how to live with this reality, how to stay human in this reality. I feel that moral responsibility. And in that sense, we're on the same page. A few days ago in Barcelona, I said this, and then people thought I was joking, but I wasn't. I was quite honest. What I wanted to give people with this book was the joy of being in the same shit together.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, there is a certain joy to it, and I learned, I had the courage to talk about this joy because I met refugees while writing Nation of Strangers, in the most horrible times, you look at each other and you laugh, and you do whatever you can without thinking about hope, without thinking about what would happen, without thinking whether you win in the end or you lose. So that joy, that liberation, was the sense of being that I wanted to offer with this book.
Yeah, I feel very much the same way. It makes a lot of sense to me. There's a quiet kind of stepping into it that I've had to do to write my recent book. I've had to be it. I need to be the message, and that's been really hard because when you write from on high, you can write these polemics and with all the kinds of ideas there, but it really is only believable, and you really only have something to offer in this particular circumstance, the circumstance that we're all in now. If you're in it and leading, at a visceral sort of level, and there is no fix. We are in a predicament. There is no solution to this. There's a way to be in it. And I think the way I see it is as a responsibility, like you say, to go first and to tell the story. I do like in the book how you're
very important because one of the most important concepts that I thought about and I wrote about in Nation, just what you said, it's the humility. Humility, I think that's why I'm talking about the moral responsibility of those who write and think when, they have the responsibility to make this reality manageable, livable for others. It comes from humility. It comes from the humility to accept the fact that we are all the same. Nobody's going to be spared from what's to come. Even those who will live in the, magnificent bunkers or so, they will even feel the taste of being a refugee. They're going to be refugees to another life, imprisoned in their very fancy bunkers. So even those most privileged should understand that this kind of humility that you're talking about is very necessary in the coming decades. To be able to build the actual, genuine, very human solidarity ties.
Yeah. I'm wondering, I think it's probably really worth asking you this, is what we're kind of shooting for here, is this about saving democracy or is it about building something else?
Well, if we translate all this to, realpolitik, yes, we're talking about a democracy, but not the democracy that we have been experiencing since 1970s. Representative democracy has been swallowed up, or the fundamental promise of democracy has been swallowed up by the capitalist reality, because democracy promises us equality, whereas capitalism says that no, there's no equality. There will not be any equality. And we are now living in the cutthroat, shameless, phase of neoliberal ideology where people, if they do not have economic worth, are, deemed disposable. Like Palestinians, for instance, they're disposable. They can die. Nobody cares, and so on. And your countries can become real estate options, as Jared Kushner, very brightly presented through a PowerPoint in Davos Economic Forum. Anyway, so if we translate all this to realpolitik, we are talking about the serious criticism of capitalist order, and we're talking about a proper democracy where equality and human dignity are at the center, really at the center, not on the paper, in real life.
So a different kind of democracy, a kind of democracy that actually benefits people. To jump from sort of, these notions of kindness, of solidarity, of community, of being in the present, realizing the past is something we can't hanker for anymore, we can't bring with us, and the future is bleak. How do we take that mindset and sort of, I guess, use it to create what comes next. We're in a privileged position. We're not actually physical exiles. We've still got a house, roof over our heads and food for the moment. How can we take this wisdom and use it to start to create a new type of democracy that will actually benefit people and not land us back in the same position again? It's a big question. So, sorry. And I was sort of building up to this, but yeah, I'm wondering where you've got to with that kind of thinking.
One of the things I don't preach, but I was discussing in Nation of Strangers, intimate and personal way, was to don't drag the act, drop the act, because we're still on so many levels, many people who are privileged enough to live the comforts of life, who have the privilege to avoid the disasters of 21st century, let's say, they still think that all these safety networks, all this, security, measures and so on, that they have in their lives, can save them from being a survivor. One of the things I say in Nation of Strangers is that we're all survivors now. So if one can accept that, if enough number of people can accept that, I think humility will come naturally. And then the solidarity then will not be a fancy political act that we do in our spare time, but we will learn to depend on solidarity, on kindness of others, and therefore it will produce a kindness in ourselves. What is the connection between this and democracy? Is this, especially in Together, after How to Lose a Country, I wrote about this. The reason we are losing democracy is because we lost faith in democracy. All those people who are supposed to protect democracy, they wouldn't die for it. How many people would die to protect democracy right now? I don't think so. But
not too many people around me.
Yeah, many people can sacrifice themselves to build a fascist regime, which they are doing at the moment. So why did we lose our faith? That was my question, which I answered in that book. But then to refresh that faith, which is the ultimate question, to refresh our faith in democracy, I think that we have to refresh our faith in ourselves, in humanity, in each other, in politics in general. And in order to do that, we have to drop the act that everything is normal. This is business as usual. No, this is not business as usual. And I think many more people are realizing this at this point in Europe and in the United States. But as I said, this is not a, realpolitik book where I come up with the solutions. I just wanted to give people the sense of, if we can be different, things can really be different. We can change everything.
Yeah.
And I think that is important because what is missing in today's politics is not the ideas for solutions. There are many ideas for solutions. Not the lack of outrage for what's happening. There's a lot of outrage. But we lack is pathos, the passion, the reason to believe. The passion, pathos. I'm trying to create the pathos, to be honest.
Yeah. And it's almost like the rest will take care of itself because we will have the living memory of democracy. We know how good democracy can work. And my sense, and I get the feeling, Ece, that you're feeling the same way. If we get the human element right, what emerges will emerge beautifully and correctly. If we stay, I guess, present in the kindness and all of these words that and concepts that we've denigrated for so long. I mean, I get the sense that you've probably found it quite uncomfortable using these words. I've had to sort of drill down and down and down to get to what is left when we lose it all, and it's like it's love. I mean, and for someone like me, who's been writing on high for my entire career, it's like really, we've got to put love up against fascism. Well, yes, that is what is left. And that is actually the thing that will galvanize, that will create the pathos, that will provide the energy to get over that complacency, to get over that complicity that you said from the outset that is causing the problem in the first place. And it's interesting. I don't know where I came across this. Yeah. I don't know where I came across this quote. I don't know whether it's in the book or whether you said it somewhere, because I write these things down sometimes. But you said, in this new world, people should know they do not count. They don't need us, so they can get rid of us in a minute. So we're actually free to do whatever we want. And I think a lot of us are feeling this. We're feeling a very eerie sense of freedom. You know, it's starting to bubble to the surface. And it's even something that Pope Francis has pointed to, this idea of, well, we might need to revolt against this. Perhaps we can sort of wind things up with you actually maybe painting a picture of what this freedom could look like.
It's a happy place. When I say to people, which I have been telling around lately in several cities, in several countries, this, we don't count, so we are free to do whatever we want. It's a sort of radical liberation, actually. So, yeah, they think that I'm saying something really, really dark, whereas I'm thinking, well, this is awesome. We don't count. We don't have to act as if we count. Because that is exhausting. People think that they are exhausted of what's happening in the world and so on. No, we are exhausted of not doing anything about what we are witnessing. That is the exhausting part.
What we care about.
Yeah. But when you were talking, I have to say something else. What I'm trying to do can be considered as, love, humility, compassion, kindness. All these words have been monopolized by religion for such a long time, namely Christianity. I'm trying to reclaim these words and bring them to the political sphere to create a pathos that the world progressive movements need today. Otherwise, we are stuck in that question. Everybody's asking themselves, why there isn't any political movement? Why isn't anybody reacting? Why isn't there enough political action? This is the answer to that question, because there is no pathos. The pathos is not there. I might be wrong, but this is my contribution to today's political thinking, today's a little bit philosophy, perhaps, but this is the human condition, I think. And yes, Pope Francis is an interesting example. He comes from Argentina. He comes from liberation theology, which I am fascinated by. So that's why I'm saying, I'm using the word sacrifice lately. What would you sacrifice? Gaza was a good example about this, because many people had to decide whether they would sacrifice their career, their social relations, their networks, their reputation, whatever. So that was a preview. Many people will have to ask, what shall I sacrifice? Can I sacrifice? How much can I sacrifice to stop this dark current of history? I'm trying to bring these questions quite kindly and compassionately to people's attention, because I think it will be the new world. We will have to use these words like sacrifice, but also love. Yes, without a smirk, seriously talk about love.
Yeah. Is this where your life's work will head now? I mean, we're at a similar stage, right? Your book's come out, you're on book tour, you're doing lots of interviews like this one where you're engaged. It's, it's very intellectual, in many ways. I mean, you have to embody it when you're on a stage and that kind of thing. But, I'm about to enter that realm with my book coming out in a few months. But I can't help but thinking, where do I go to from here? Is there a book to be written, or do I need to be on the ground with my sleeves rolled up? Where are you at with that question?
Congratulations on the new book, and I'm super looking forward to reading it. And I hope it will bring you many, many beautiful people from around the world. And this is what's happening to me with Nation of Strangers. So I feel blessed in a way, because things. It's like one of those, magic boxes. All these colorful handkerchiefs it's like that Nation of Strangers now. The things come out from this book. I opened an exhibition in collaboration with Italian and American artists in Rome, and now I'm going to do another installation and performance together with Dutch artists in Amsterdam, in Palermo, something in Hamburg, something in Berlin, a musical, and all these things come from the book, not me. I mean, like, people come to the book and they take away things and then they produce something else. So the book becomes a universe, or maybe the book opened the doors of a universe, which I consider the universe of beauty. Because as you said, when you double down on everything, you come to love. I come to our inherent urge to create beauty. And that is the last front against fascism. When you lose everything, you still have your urge to create beauty. I don't mean only aesthetic beauty, but also political and moral beauty. So I think I will stand there and wait for others to come on that front, on that line, defense line, creating beauty. And for the last 10 years, but even more than that, after 2002, I think mostly, I wrote novels, but most of my writing was about political stuff. And this is one of the things fascism does to you. It narrows you down because there is this moral and political responsibility and so on. But lately I discovered that my moral and political responsibility to myself is actually to create beauty as well. So this is where I will go.
Yeah.
I don't know in what form yet, but this is where I'll go, I think, to that defense line of humanity.
That was exactly the answer that I was hoping for, actually. I think, I mean, in terms of being the message, right? Like, the linear material world that fascism came out of and created, it's coming to an end. It is going to come to an end. We're not there yet. I think the wonderful thing is that we can actually be part of what comes next. And it isn't linear and it's not material, and it is about notions like beauty and so on. And we can get on with doing that now. And I think there are some of us, I imagine a lot of the listeners here, who are already thinking that way as well. It's so nice to hear you articulate it like that. Inspiring for me, because it's a question in my mind.
It's lovely to hear those questions, which are very much in the same frequency, because then it gives me the confidence to say that we're all on the same page. Not all of us, perhaps, but some of us who intuitively feel and sense the human condition today. So I'm so thankful for this conversation, Sarah.
Yeah, me too. I knew that we were meant to talk. We've been trying to, anyone listening, we've been trying to make this conversation happen for so long, and it's been a comedy of errors in many ways, but I knew it was a conversation that we had to have. Look, I've got one last question.
Sure.
How are you coping? I mean, I asked this question of everybody in this series. How are you coping with remaining human amidst all of this?
With friends. It's a very, very clear answer. Nothing else. With very good friends. And I'm lucky in that sense, or maybe I constructed this life in such a way that not every, but in many, many cities, I have really, really good friends. So, and thanks to them, I feel cushioned from this urge to become unhuman, less feeling, and so on. They give me the sense of security, sense of, not security necessarily, but sense of allowing myself to be me. So that is very important. A million years ago, literally last century, I was interviewing the psychiatrist and writer Arno Gruen in Zurich. And I asked him, after a long interview, I asked him, so who are you seeing for therapy? And he said, what therapy? I have friends. And now I understand what he said, what he meant, really. When you have friends, you're good to go, I think.
I think that's an answer of an unhomed person, because like yourself, I live, rather nomadically. I don't normally live in my home country, somewhat driven out by other factors, not too dissimilar in some ways, but what is really particular about my life is I've got friends around the world. I don't have a family structure, and a work structure and a neighborhood structure that I can draw on, but I have friends, and it's an art. It's an art to keep in touch with friends and to create the forums to meet up in and to do that dance.
Actually, this is exactly why I say people, you are, for instance, with this story, is the future of humanity. And I think if you live like that, and if you understand that friendship, love, these are the things that actually you can hold on to, there's nothing else, then you become the antithesis of those people who are traveling the world on, jet planes, private jets, for profit. We are not doing that for profit. We are doing that because we have to. We are obliged to. And second, we have friends to stop by, not bunkers, but friends. I think this forms the antithesis of the dark forces, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. Hey, listen, Ece, this was a wonderful conversation. I really do hope we cross paths, perhaps in Berlin, perhaps in Greece. I would absolutely love that. That'd be super fun. Okay, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah.